I was sitting in a coffee shop 6 months after exiting corporate, mapping everything I'd learned. I was writing down the limitations of closed systems. I was drawing diagrams of how they work, and then something shifted. Instead of continuing to analyze what was broken, I started sketching what needs to exist. How authority would flow in a system designed for distribution, how information would move in a system designed for transparency, how innovation could happen in a system designed for evolution. That's when I realized I don't just understand what's broken, I understand the architecture of what comes next. That's clarity, and that's permission to build. I'm Mark Roach. This is transcendent. My decades inside flawed systems taught me not just what they can't do, but what revolutionary platforms need to solve if they're going to do what closed systems cannot. Now, today we're exploring platform architecture, the 5 principles that create resilience closed systems cannot achieve. By the end, you'll understand 3 things. First, the architectural principles that allow platforms to survive founders and accommodate evolution. Second, why methodology matters more than personality and how to build systems that transmit without dependence. And third, how to design economic models that create sovereignty instead of dependency. This comes from understanding exactly where closed systems fail and designing platforms that solve for those failures. Let me show you what revolutionary architecture looks like. Closed systems are brilliant in efficiency. They concentrate decision-making, which allows speed. They create coherence through conformity, which allows unified action. They concentrate resources, which allows quick deployment. But they're fragile because they depend on personality. Remove that personality and the system collapses. Revolutionary platforms solve what closed systems cannot. They're dissolved around 5 principles that create resilience independent of personality. Principle 1, frameworks, they transmit without personality. In closed systems, the method is embedded in the leader's personality. You learn how to decide by watching the leader decide. You learn what to value by observing what the leader values. The method is inseparable from the person. Revolutionary platforms separate methodology from personality. The how is explicit. It's documented. It's teachable. Any document facilitator can deliver it. The framework doesn't depend on a particular person's charisma or genius. It stands alone. This solves what closed systems can't: succession without collapse. It solves transferability. It solves scalability that doesn't require personality at every level. It solves the problem that the most important work, teaching, gets better when it's not dependent on a single person's particular genius. Principle 2, clear methodology over personality, dependence. Closed systems hide methodology because the mystery creates dependency. You need the organization because it has the knowledge. You stayed aligned because you need the knowledge. The hidden methodology is the control mechanism. Revolutionary platforms make methodology transparent. How decisions get made is visible. What criteria determine resource allocation is clear. What the standards of excellence are is documented. The thinking is open source. This solves what closed systems can't: genuine autonomy. When methodology is transparent, people can eventually implement it themselves. They can take the framework elsewhere. They teach others. The platform works itself out of being necessary because people graduate into independence. Principle 3, open source intelligence. Closed systems restrict information flow because information asymmetry is power. The center has information others don't have. The information advantage is what allows the center to make decisions that others can't question. Revolutionary platforms distribute intelligence. Important information is available to everyone who needs to understand. Decisions are explained with reasoning that's visible. Context is shared widely. Disagreement is facilitated because people have the information to inform their own opinions. This solves what closed systems can't. Genuine buy-in based on understanding rather than conformity. It solves decision quality because more perspectives are brought to bear. It solves resilience because the organization continues functioning when the center is less available. Principle 4, sovereignty as foundation. Closed systems create belonging through dependency. You stay because the organization meets needs that you just can't meet independently. You're dependent on access, on approval, on the organization's resources, and that dependency is the loyalty mechanism. Revolutionary platforms build on sovereignty. People stay because they genuinely are choosing to, not because they have to. The platform serves people's independence rather than creating dependency on it. Participants become more capable, more autonomous, more sovereign through their involvement. They could leave and continue functioning well because they've become more skilled, more resourced, and more independent. This solves what closed systems can't. Genuine commitment without coercion. It solves moral authority because the platform serves people instead of extracting from them. It solves long-term sustainability because people stay through choice rather than necessity. Principle 5, resilience over personality. Closed systems optimize for efficiency under brilliant leadership. They sacrifice everything else to concentrate decision-making around the leader's genius. Revolutionary platforms optimize for resilience and long-term sustainability. They sacrifice some efficiency to ensure the system continues functioning across different leadership styles and through various challenges. They're not optimized for speed under ideal conditions. They're optimized for sustained excellence across all conditions. This solves what closed systems can't: continuity. Leadership changes, circumstances change, market conditions shift. Revolutionary platforms are designed to handle those shifts without collapsing. They lose efficiency, but they gain sustainability. And over the long term, what that trade-off creates more value. Now, closed systems have economic models that create permanent dependency. You need the organization to thrive. You can't leave because you wouldn't have the resources to survive independently. Revolutionary platforms need economic models that create sovereignty. People become more resourced and more independent through their involvement. They graduate from needing the platform toward becoming platforms themselves. This requires thinking carefully about pricing, access, and what gets charged for and what doesn't. It requires designing for scalability that doesn't require centralized control. It requires understanding that the most successful platforms eventually work themselves out of being necessary for some people. The economic model isn't secondary. It's core to whether a platform actually creates sovereignty or just replaces one form of dependency with another. You design revolutionary platforms by starting with what closed systems cannot do. Use the frustrations you gathered inside the system. Those pain points are your specifications. Authority, is it too concentrated? Well, distribute it. Information too controlled? Make it transparent. Personality is required. Document and transmit methodology. Innovation is suppressed. Design for evolution. Dependency is created. Build with sovereignty into the foundation. Each principle you design for solves something that closed systems can't solve. Together, they create platforms that are less efficient in the short term, but infinitely more resilient over time. If you've done the work from my previous scripts here and videos, recognizing infiltration as curriculum, reading system architecture, maintaining integrity, translating frustration into requirements, recognizing completion, well, then you have everything you need to design a revolutionary platform yourself. You've lived in the gap between what is and what needs to exist. And that gap is the architecture. That gap is your specification. That gap is the foundation for what you build next. Don't try to replicate what closed systems do better. They're brilliant at efficiency. You can't compete with them on their terms. Instead, solve what they can't solve. Build for resilience, for distributed authority, for transparency, for sovereignty. Build for the long term instead of the short term. Build for people's independence instead of their dependency. That's where revolutionary platforms find their advantage. That's where you build something that lasts. I'm Mark Roach, and this is Transcendent, wishing you all the best. The platforms worth building aren't more efficient versions of what exist. They solve what existing systems cannot.